we have our sales flyers that come out every month, and we have a digital copy, and then we also have these paper copies that come in your box. But for those who maybe don't look at them, there's a lot more in here than just what's on sale. We work really hard every month to put some relevant articles in here for you. So you'll see different topics like DIY articles, you'll see health articles, all kinds of things in here. You'll also find write-ups about new products that will be coming out in the month that the sales flyer goes live. You find some other wonderful things in here, including a little section that says from the desk of David Stelzer, and we call this David's Corner. And this is where David writes articles and information for you to know what's happening around here and what's on his heart for that particular month. January, what David spoke about in his article was something that we labeled New Beginnings and No Fear. We just had an overwhelming response to some of the things that David talked about. You know, the idea behind what he wrote in the article, and then we are going to take questions as well. And in the meantime, I'm going to pass the floor to David.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you. Thank you for making it a great month here at Azure. We've had a lot of fun this month. But this is a really important subject in today's world. I feel like, and again, maybe this is just David philosophy, but I feel like we've come into a world where everything is about safety. And I'm not against safety, don't get me wrong, but everything's about safety for the body. Very little about safety for the spirit or for the soul, if you will. We don't worry about keeping our children's hearts or souls pure or healthy, or even our bodies healthy. We worry so much about keeping them safe. We make sure that we pass laws. You gotta wear a seat belt. If they're under 70 pounds or in a car seat, they're this and that. If they're a baby, they have to have an approved car seat. If they ride a bicycle, they need to wear a helmet. You do all this stuff. And I'm not saying it's necessarily bad or good. I mean, every person and parent should make their own choices concerning those kinds of things. But when we worry so much about the body, about, what's the worst thing that can happen? It's like, always heal. Yes, a life could be lost. But how much, is it worse to lose a life, a physical life, than to lose the spirit and the productivity and everything that makes us really human and productive in society? I'm just saying our focus needs to not be so much on keeping ourselves safe physically, or safe from uncomfortable situations, or safe from any of those things, but our focus needs to be on our purpose in life, what we're doing and what the purpose is. What is the purpose what are we trying to accomplish? What in our life is important? Let's focus on that. And if, I don't necessarily, when I raised my kids, I didn't burden them particularly with making sure that every safety precaution was followed. If they're riding the four-wheeler and it says, oh, no more than one person on this four-wheeler, I didn't make them abide by that rule, right? I had 11 kids. So sometimes 5 or 6 of them would pile on a four-wheeler at one time. That's just out in the field. Heck, they're not going to get hit by a truck or anything. They might hit a fence or tip over and get dirt on their clothes. I mean, what is it? It's like, it's real life. It's the life that they can live, but yet they could then interact and do things. Oh, let's all jump on the four-wheeler and go out and, help take care of the cattle, or help take care of, let's go weed this field. Let's all go do this thing. And they had something that there was purpose in. They were helping out with the farm. They were helping out with real life. They were helping out in a real situation. And we weren't worrying about so much that we were following every safety rule to do that, to do those things. It was about, let's just get in, get things done, achieve our purpose, and do that. And I feel like, as a society, I mean, we just dealt with this thing, the past few years with this COVID piece. And everything about COVID was about fear. And then when everybody, when people actually got COVID, other than a few rare cases, when people actually got COVID, it wasn't all that bad, right? I mean, at least for healthy people. And I get there's compromised immune systems and other things. And everyone needs to make the decision on that. But there was so much hype and so much scare. Stay in your house, wear a mask, don't do this, don't do that, don't do the other thing, don't go visit grandma. Are we really trading the soul for a little bit? Grandma, she's isolated. She can't be visited by her grandchildren because she's worried about getting the flu. I mean, what kind of a society are we getting to? We're talking about the souls or the spirits of the children, these grandchildren that did not get the wisdom from their grandparents. And we're talking about the well-being and the souls of the grandparents that did not get to have the interaction with their grandchildren. There is nothing more important than those kinds of things. And it was all driven by fear. Almost never is whatever happens that you're afraid of as bad as the fear that we were afraid of up front. The fear is way worse than the thing we're afraid of actually happening most of the time. And I'm not, bad things can happen. I'm not going down that path that they don't happen. But what I am saying is that when we allow our lives to be driven by fear, and it's not labeled as fear, it's labeled as safety most of the time. But really, it's fear. And the whole idea is we're put on this earth to make a difference in somebody else's life. We're here to do a job, to make somebody else's life better, and to improve our own lives. When we're living in fear and we're not doing the things that we could be doing because we're afraid, whether it's because we don't want to get out, are we afraid of changing careers, doing a new thing? And so we stay in a job that we absolutely hate our whole life long because we're afraid that if we don't do that we'll starve. I mean, and I'm not saying, quit your job and do whatever you want to do, but you do that little by little because if we don't have fear, we're actually willing to work for it as well. So that's a part of it. I mean, we can do that other thing nights and weekends for a while until we know, until we have the confidence that we can make a living at it. It's everything that we do, and especially when we're talking about our children and encouraging our children. I'm just so, I'm so grateful that, I was allowed to do all kinds of hard things as a child. And, in today's world, people would look at that. When I was 8 years old or somewhere about that age, I got told, hey, field needs plowing. Go take care of it. Here, I'll show you how to start the tractor. And that was, was that safe? Well, I mean, maybe not. In today's world, probably they would say, oh, that wasn't safe. But yet, in my life, it yielded huge results because I had responsible activity to do at a very young age, which ended up translating in my life, at least, that actually became absolutely necessary a couple years later, where I actually had to take over the entire farming because there was nobody else to do it. So it was in good, it was good preparation, but at the same time, that would have never happened had I not had that preparation. And it was, it was very important. It's something that I'm grateful for in my life today because I haven't been afraid very often to take risks, to do things I haven't done before and learn new things. And I want to pass that same thing off to my children as I raise my children or my grandchildren. As I see them grow up, I do not want them to be afraid of anything. And children are often born with little fears anyway. I remember, one of my children was afraid of coyotes. Not sure, had a cousin or something tell them how scary coyotes were. Out here, coyotes howl all the time. It's a very common thing. Every night, pretty much any night that's got a moon out, the coyotes are going to be howling. And so every time they heard the coyotes howl, they were really, really scared about that. And so I remember I took the child out and said, hey, we went for a long walk, about, I don't know, a mile or so, in the middle of the night. Well, not the middle of the night, but way after dark. And we talked the whole time about how great the coyotes sounded to try to get over that fear of coyotes. Now, obviously coyotes is a non-threatening fear. I mean, coyotes don't attack people. There's never any cases I've ever heard of anyway. But at the same time, many fears that children have, or adults for that matter, have some basis in truth. There is a little bit of danger in those things. So even if there's a little bit of danger in that thing, are we willing to take the risk? Are we willing to risk danger because our purpose is important enough to be willing to take that risk? There is no soldier that ever goes into battle that is not taking a huge risk, way more than we or our children would ever take in everyday life. They take huge risks. But they do that because the purpose, they feel like that the purpose that they're fighting for is worth the risk. It's the same way in our lives. If we have a purpose-driven life, if we have a purpose in our life for what we're doing, and we're making positive headway and a positive difference in the world, and we know why we're doing the thing that we're doing it, we are willing to take a certain amount of risk, whether that's physical risk, whether that's financial risk, whether that's, shall we say, status risk. We might look stupid. All of those things are, if our purpose matters, we're willing to take those risks. And sometimes, with our children, we maybe even create the purpose and take the risks, even if maybe in the long run it doesn't matter. And then our children become used to having a purpose, having the ability to take risks, and to be able to deal with things that come up. If you're taking risks, there is a chance that you could put yourself in, there's a much higher chance that you could put yourself in a crisis situation that you actually need to get out of. Just for instance, if you're a rock climber and you're climbing rocks, there is a chance, maybe not a very big one, if you know what you're doing, but there is a chance that a rope could break or something could happen that could put you in a crisis situation that you have to think of how to get out of safely. Whereas if you're sitting on the couch watching rock climbing on TV, that's much less likely to ever happen because you're not actually out there taking that risk. So and you want to do it in such a way that it can be mild problem solving first when we're working with our children particularly. But here at Azure, I try to encourage this within the company as well. Look at what the risk analysis is, but put yourself in a position sometimes where you do have to think outside of the box and you do have to figure out how to fix that thing. Hey, I'm sitting on a ledge up here 100 feet off the ground, and I don't really know that I have the skill to get up the rest of the way without a rope. How am I going to deal with that? Am I going to be able to holler loud enough to catch somebody's attention? They can throw me a new rope. What am I going to do? How am I going to go, how am I going to get this situation handled? And we can do that in little ways in our life, whether it's just, hey, we're out in the garden and we just found some new bugs that we don't know we don't know if they're harmful or not harmful. Now we have risks to, are these good bugs or are these bad bugs? Well, we can learn. And that's a learning opportunity for our children. And for ourselves, for that matter. But there's always a risk that we might be, doing the wrong thing. Oh, are we going to kill that bug? Or are we going to try to find it a better home? And, we don't really know the difference between, a whitefly and a ladybug. I don't know. So as we learn these things in real life, there's always putting ourselves in a position that we need to make decisions on the fly, that we need to be able to handle small crises. Then when we get into a situation with a big crisis, it's not very, we know how to handle it. And because we have practiced. And that's what concerns me about today's society in many ways, is we are seeing so much emphasis on safety, on making sure that we never put ourselves in any kind of risky situation, that we're never going to be going down that hill way too fast on our bike and not know what to do because we never go down the hill on the bike. We do it very safely with our helmet and our gloves and our shin pads in a very controlled environment, and it'll never happen. Where do we, if we're going down that way too fast and we don't have any of those things on, we have to think on our feet much more innovatively. And, if we do crash, we're going to have skinned up knees. Or something. And it could happen. But in real life, we probably are going to be able to think through that and figure out how to slow down correctly or go off into a grassy strip or something, whatever the innovation is for that thing. And as we train our children to think innovatively, if they never put themselves in a position where they have to think quickly, they won't be able to do it. And those are the things that I really feel. That was the point of the article, and I really do feel strongly about this. And again, this may be David philosophy. It's not necessarily an Azure thing, so to speak. It's not really about food and things that I normally talk about. It's just, something that was on my heart that day, and I still feel pretty strongly about it, because life, a purpose-driven life, is extremely important to me, and I feel like most of you parents that really care about your children, purpose-driven life with your children is one of the most important things that you can ever do for them, is help them find that purpose. Because if they don't have a purpose, they will drift. And drifting children is, let's just say, that's not a good thing. It's not a good place to be, especially as a teenager. So I'm just, I think that was pretty much what I wanted to say, to elaborate on that just a little bit.
Well, we have a couple questions that came in. So one of the questions is, why do you think society has become so fear-driven?
Well, this is, maybe an opinion. I don't know, for a fact. But some of the contributing factors, I think it's a combination of things. But in my opinion, some of the contributing factors are, number one, the insurance government collaboration. So insurance companies have put extreme pressure on governments and on public, shall we say, communication campaigns to instill fear of physical objects and things that they may have to pay for somewhere down the line. So they don't want to have to pay for that bike wreck, that skinned knee that might end up with a hospital visit. They don't want it to happen. So, and I'm saying it probably won't end up as a hospital visit, because after all, you're an Azure customer and you know how to, use Nutribiotic and Golden Seal and some of those things, and put a bandage on that skinned knee. You're not going to have to take them to the hospital. But insurance companies are worried about those kinds of things. So I think that's one contributing factor. I mean, obviously insurance companies are the ones that make all these rules about, seat belts and car seats and all those kinds of things. That wasn't driven by government or by the people. That was driven 100% by insurance companies, because statistically, they're a little bit less likely to have to pay for a serious injury if the child was in a car seat. It's just statistics to them. It's not about real life. It's not about purpose, about anything. It's about statistics. So that's one thing. Another is the extreme, the litigation, shall we say, litigious society, where there's a lot of lawsuits. So a lot of companies become so afraid of getting sued that they make all kinds of rules with their product specs to make sure that nobody, that there's no way that anyone could really get hurt seriously on that. And if they did get hurt, they couldn't blame them. Because after all, they said only one person on the four-wheeler, don't go over 20 miles an hour, don't do this, don't do that. The rules are not that long. And, so if you do all those things and you still get hurt, then, at least maybe it's not on them. So I think that's another thing. And then the third thing, which is probably the biggest factor, is that fear drives, unfortunately, it drives a lot of commerce. And it allows big pharma companies and such to be able to sell a lot of products that nobody needs to buy, because you're afraid of this or that. That's what we had here with this pandemic thing we were talking about a few minutes ago. We had a situation where big pharma companies that were creating these vaccines and things like that were creating more and more and more fear so they could sell untold billions of dollars worth of vaccines and masks and other things that they were scaring people into having to get or buy. And truthfully, they were all worthless, at least in my opinion. The only thing that really helps for things like a virus is a healthy immune system, guys. It's the only thing that helps. No, mask doesn't do anything. Vaccines aren't going to do anything. In fact, there's some chance that there's some danger in that. But a healthy immune system is what helps with those kinds of things. There's very little that you can sell to somebody to have a healthy immune system. Health breeds health. If we live a healthy and abundant lifestyle, we're going to have a strong immune system. If we, there's some herbs and supplements, and we actually made a video on that very early in the pandemic about some of the herbs and supplements to boost your immune system. That is what takes care of our body's resistance to disease. All these other things don't. There's only one thing. That's a healthy lifestyle. It's healthy eating habits. It's healthy food. It's a healthy attitude. And, add in a few herbal supplements and things that come from nature. You have a strong immune system. You're not going to get it. And if you do get it, it's not going to be any big deal, right? No matter what the disease is. I'm sorry. Our bodies are made to handle every disease that's on the planet. But if they can scare us enough, then they get us to go do all these things that probably weren't good for us to begin with. And then we wear a mask. We don't go anywhere. We don't visit grandparents. Then we go get vaccinations, do all these things because we're afraid of something that really wasn't anything to be afraid of, especially if we had a healthy immune system. And that's, so I think those are probably the three big factors. And then, everywhere you have there's the safety focus now. So, let's just be real about that. And no one would dare in today's society, and I'm not even daring really, to say safety first is a bad idea. I'm not trying to say that either, but that is really voodoo type thing to say that. You don't want to say anything like that. Is safety first? Oh yeah. In our workplace, in this business, everywhere, safety first. Safety is important. I'm not even completely crossing that line here. But what I'm saying is sometimes there's things that are more important. Safety is important, but it may not always be first. And as a society, I think we need to look at that the important things in life, so it's just been ingrained in us, I guess.
So there's another question that came in. Should people fear for the safety of the food supply?
I'm not going to tell you to fear for anything. I'm the last person that's going to tell you that. What I am going to tell you is that we should prepare for eventualities. And this is kind of like, asking the squirrel if he should have a few nuts in the hollow tree for winter, when fall's coming on. That's a very different thing than fearing for the food supply. And so I'm going to say, no, we don't need to fear about the food supply. We have a wonderfully productive earth. God made the earth to produce abundance of food. It's us that screws that up sometimes with disruptions. I mean, weather disruptions and things like that totally can happen. And I think we should be prepared for that. You know, we just went through a year and, you know, and I told everybody at the time, we went through a year that we had the lowest food supply in the history of the world. Well, of the history of the United States, at least. We went through the world and all of history that might be pushing it. But in the life of the United States, we had the lowest food supply. We were within months of running out of food. But that did not mean that the soil is not producing food. It was. The gardens were still producing. The fields were still producing. The sun was still shining. The rain was still falling. The bacteria in the soil was still doing its job, and it was working. So am I afraid that, you know, about the safety of the food supply? I'm sometimes afraid that, you know, we have some really stupid people in charge in some areas that, you know, maybe I'm saying that a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but we are not always making the best decisions regarding the distribution and the allocation of the world food supply. I am not one bit worried about the ability of the earth to produce enough food for every human on the planet. And I think we could double or triple the number of humans on the planet and still have plenty of food supply if we're smart about it and we do it and we take care of our soil, take care of our land, and grow our food innovatively. So no, long term, I have no fear about the food supply. What I do have, you know, I do have concerns, and that's why I think we should all be wise and make sure that we're not, you know, eating hand to mouth. That's why it's very important to have a pantry in our homes with enough food, you know, to last our family for a period of time, whatever you feel like based on your, you know, your area and, you know, what access you have and how good a garden you can grow and all those things, that you have enough food in your pantry to last for a period of time. I think that's just wise stewardship. We should all do that. We should have food in our pantry or in our basement or wherever that is in our homes to be able to, you know, that's just wise stewardship. That's like putting up for the winter. You know, and in our life, you know, we can a little food out of the garden in the orchard every year to put up for winter because we know that, you know, it's hard to grow some of that stuff in the wintertime. And it's the same, you know, when we're dealing about national food security. We should have a pantry. That's wise stewardship. But don't fear for the food supply of the country because we have a wonderfully abundant land. It's amazingly abundant. And God made everything to grow. If we take care of it, we can grow all the food that we need. I am 100% convinced of that. And I think we could, you know, and I am not the least bit worried about food getting short, you know, because we may not have enough. There's too many people for the amount of food or anything like that. We're not even close. Not even remotely close. And I feel like, you know, if we're wise with the provisions, there's very little limit on the amount of food that this abundant soil and stewardship can produce.
So we have time for one more question. Now there's a couple more here, but I'm going to just pick one more question. How can a parent reverse fear in their children? So if a child has already kind of been programmed to be fearful, do you have any suggestions on how a parent can work to reverse fear in a child?
Well, I told the little story about the coyote thing with my children. And I feel like that is the number one way that we can reverse fear. So we create a very comfortable situation for them to face that fear head on. Let's just say the child is, and I don't know how old of a child we're talking about here. It changes as the age progresses, but if we're talking about, say a 3 to 5 year old child, and that's a lot of times where a lot of fears come into play. Little babies almost never have any fear of anything. And once they get a little older and we say, oh, no, hot, this is bad, and society has given them that and they experience a little bit of pain a time or two, then fear begins to set in. And most of the time that's because somebody told them to be afraid of that thing. We had some cousins telling my child that big bad coyotes, this is like, they were just, teasing and being kids, but they created a fear. So most of the time that's because somebody created the fear. So the way that, my best way to deal with it is to actually create a comfortable situation where they can actually face that fear face on. So if they're afraid of the dark, for instance, I know quite a few children are afraid of the dark. So you take them and say, hey, we're going to go, and you maybe take them in your arms even, and you go out into the dark. And you say, isn't this so wonderful? Isn't it great out here? Isn't the sky beautiful? Have you looked at the stars? Isn't it nice to be in the dark? And you create a comfortable situation of being in the dark. And then maybe you take them out of your arms. And you say, hey, go over here. And it may take more than 1 or 2 sessions because the fear was probably created with more than 1 or 2 sessions. But as we let them face their fears straight on and they realize that there's no danger in the dark, that dark doesn't bite, it never hurt anybody, then that fear dissipates and it's gone. Once a fear is faced head on, whether that's a child or an adult, then the fear is gone. Once you've actually experienced it, almost always there's no more fear. It's gone forever. So with children, with adults, it's about facing the fear head on, doing that thing. If the children's afraid of heights, go to some place that's high, in a safe environment. Make sure that it's not, some place that's super dangerous. I mean, don't start them out cliff climbing. Start them out somewhere where they're just in a high spot. And then, go out on a catwalk or something. And look, oh, isn't it beautiful? Can't we see a lot from here? Create a very positive situation with that, and do it just little by little. Maybe it's just not very high to begin with, and then you do more and more. But as soon as that fear is faced and they realize there's no danger in being high, in a high location or in a dark spot or whatever the fear is, that's where the fear vanishes. Any fear faced is gone. Because fear is kind of like a boogeyman in the corner. It's like that, as soon as you turn on the light, those dark spots in the corner go away, the boogeyman's gone. There's nothing there. And most fears are that way. Most of the fears that actually keep us from doing important things in our life.